This is a special meeting, so we can only deal with the items that are on the agenda or related to it. I want to start off by giving a little bit of a definition with Jen can feel happy to step in to correct me if I'm wrong. But we're going to amend the first, the bonding resolution. And part of that is that the Board of Selectmen approved the purchase of the 37 West as well as the bonding. The Board of Finance, based upon the charter, only needs to approve how we're paying for it, which is the bonding. The RTM by charter is responsible for doing both the purchase as well as the what I call the appropriation and funding. When I look at this a little bit differently from what was done, my position is that we can't approve an acquisition without saying how we're going to fund it. So that one can't be a loan. And we can't do an appropriation or a bonding resolution if we haven't said what we're buying. So we're going to move the first resolution. And then what we're going to do also at the RTM is amend that resolution to incorporate the bonding. So I need somebody to move resolution 25-23 for the purchase of the parking lot and authorizing the issuance of bonds and notes in the amount of $5.2 million to meet said appropriation. Do I have somebody moving it? I have Pierre moving it. I have Louisa second. Okay. Now, I need to amend the following into that resolution. And it's the resolution of the Town of Darien to consider and approve the purchase of real property known as 37 West Avenue, Darien, Connecticut. Whereas the Town of Darien has the opportunity to purchase a parking lot consisting of approximately 2.01 acres of real property located at 37 West Avenue and adjacent to the Darien train station. And whereas the Board of Selectmen has approved the acquisition of said property, and whereas under the appropriate provisions of the charter, in particular section 48F, the representative town meeting has the authority to approve the sale or acquisition of real property by the town, and whereas said property is currently owned by West Avenue Parking LLC, the principals of which are members of the Coons family. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the representative town meeting of the Town of Darien hereby approves and authorizes the purchase of approximately 2.01 acres of land located at 37 West Avenue and authorizes the first selectman to make the necessary steps and execute the necessary documents to acquire said property. Do I have a moving of that amendment? I have Charles P. And Beth, you're going to second? Okay, so can we vote on the amendment? All in favor? Raise your hand,
Aye.
say aye.
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 You know, Bobby, if you want to vote, I can count your vote.
Yeah.
I do have an opinion here, but not a vote.
So, okay, so that passes. And so now when we vote on this, it will be the original 25-23 as amended, which allows us to do it all at one time. So let me see if I can find what I had. I know most of us have seen this. I got to figure out how to share again. Hold on. That's not what I want. on my screen here. Here we go. Come on. Stay there. There we go. Okay, does everybody see that presentation, or is it a little bit off?
Little off.
A little bit off.
Give me a second. All right, how about I don't share it? I'm going to run through it. Most of the stuff I'm assuming we already know. There we go. Is that better?
No,
No, but
We can really only see
think-
the town seal and a
but I think
little
most-
bit.
Yeah.
Oh, there we
there we
go.
go.
But I think most of us have read it already, no?
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
I'm just going to go through a couple of the key parts on it. First, what I'm going to do is put Pierre in a little bit of a disadvantage. I asked Pierre to go through the contract and do a term sheet. Do you want to just cover the salient points of it, Pierre?
Oh, I wasn't prepared. I wasn't
All right.
prepared.
Or we
I
can have
don't even
Bobby
have it
do
in
it
front of
since he
me.
did it.
I don't even have it in front of me.
I was going to say, you have the guy who drafted the contract here in front of you. So,
Yeah,
you know,
right.
to be fair
That's
to
who
Pear,
I'm leading to.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pear, I defer to you. Would you want me to step in here?
Yeah, why don't you step in there? I mean,
Yeah.
the main thing I did was point out just a couple of extra things from what was the original term sheet you had shared. So none of which I think we should be worried about.
Interfere
about
with
here.
the decision, right?
Yeah.
All right. In general terms, it is a contract for the purchase of 37 West Avenue for $5.13 million. We had a due diligence contingency period that passed on October 17th, so it is now expired. The contract is contingent upon obtaining we use a defined term, town approvals, which means mandatory referral from P&Z, RTM vote in favor of acquisition, and beyond that, we have an estimated closing date of November 14th to accommodate the RTM calendar and provide the necessary 10-day period for any referendum. Though we reserve the right at the discretion of the town to extend the closing date out to December 31st, should we deem it necessary to do so. Otherwise, I think those would consist of the material terms right there.
Can I add two others, Bobby, that you may want to talk about? Not an attorney, but this contract is consistent with most land acquisitions, commercial land acquisitions. It's a limited liability. Do you want to expound on that a little bit?
Just to be fair, in what context do you mean? Like
this is that.
Hey, Jack, I think what you're getting at is we're buying the property, whereas as is, there's very few, if any, protections from the seller. We're taking that liability on, which is why we had the due diligence period and we could do the appropriate title searches and had a chance to basically investigate the property. So I think that's one of the key things here is the town is buying it as is, and we're aware of what the property is and any of the, forgot the word I'm looking for, rights of way or anything else like that might be,
in there. And that's consistent with commercial property because nobody's going back what happened 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Correct in a general sense. Yes.
Yeah. The other thing is that the town put down a deposit of $513,000, and
hey, Jack,
unless we do,
just to be clear, the town has not put a deposit down yet. We are not at risk for anything.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, and Bobby can make that clear here, but that was the other point I made in the note is we're really not at risk until after the RTM has approved it. And then
that's when we do it. Right.
A period of time to make that deposit payment. And, again, that I think is just important for everyone here on the committee to understand is the town is not actually at risk And if for whatever reason it chose not to move ahead, we wouldn't lose our deposit.
Correct. The deposit will not be payable until the 10th day after, assuming the RTM votes in favor of the acquisition, 10 days after. In any event, the contract, both the contract and the seller have been made aware that in any event, even if we don't obtain the RTM approval by any deadline of the contract, so it's a firm condition precedent to closing, meaning that even if every deadline in the contract has passed, if we have not obtained the necessary RTM approvals, the town is under no obligation to move forward with the purchase.
Correct.
Okay. Next, I just want to talk briefly about the analysis done on debt service.
Hey,
Um,
hey, Jack.
Yeah.
I have a more fundamental question before we get into some of these details.
Sure.
So the key argument for the town owning this property is to gain control over it, right? i.e., so that we can control, is it a parking lot or a parking garage or a park or a, bunch of retail stores or whatever it might be. And my question is, and I watched Jay-Z's video, etc. And what isn't clear to me is, the town has a planning and zoning commission, a planning and zoning committee. Like in theory, we could say, fine, sell it to anybody you want. However, but since we own the planning and zoning authority, if somebody comes up with something that we don't like, we can block it. So I'd like to understand that.
Okay. So I will try and give my best interpretation without being a P&Z attorney. And if Wayne or Bobby wants to jump in, they're more than welcome. First of all, it's strategic in two ways. Number one is not to sell it to a developer. The other way is to make sure the state doesn't buy it. If the state buys it, we have absolutely no say in what goes on. If the town if a developer buys it, providing they're not meeting certain guidelines on the 830G, which would allow them to not comply with all of the zoning requirements, the planning and zoning could put some aspects onto it. The thing that, and I know there's been a lot of discussion, John mentioned at the Board of Finance meeting that he's not looking to sell it to a developer and doesn't foresee that. The question is the parking lot. And if you go back to John's presentation, and in one of them that showed the various properties, there was one with a red line there. And I'm going to ask Jen Chinesky to come in on that. But that's I believe it's a sewer or drainage pipe. It's something that will be eliminated when we do the flood mitigation at Tilly Pond. But Tilly Pond is first in its design phase. And we probably won't be even seeing that come to the RTM. We might see the other one, Saltbox, come next fall, but we're not going to see this Tilly flood mitigation for at least 2 years to 3 years. So nobody's going to be doing any development on that property for quite some time. Is that a fair statement, Jen?
Us if we buy it, or
well,
just
anybody
anyone?
buys it. If you have that, and they're not going to be able to take out
but Jack, that's just a timing question. I'm making a more principled point, right?
Okay.
From my point of view, and I'm not saying I'm not in favor of doing this acquisition, but I'm just saying, from my point of view, the ideal situation would be somebody comes along, writes a check for $5 million, planning and we keep the tax revenue, planning and zoning commission says, you want to do anything else other than the parking lot? The answer is no, right? So then effectively you have a third party paying for parking, just like we have today at 37 West Avenue, right? So that, to my point, would be the cheapest and most effective thing for the town. Now, so that would be my base case.
I don't mean to cut you off, but the problem is the property is currently valued at about 2.6 million in its appraised value as a parking lot. It's 5.2 as commercial property that allows development. So I don't foresee anybody giving us 5.2 to maintain a parking lot.
Hey, Jack, maybe I can answer Charles's question. As I understand it, right? If we try to rely on P&Z to essentially restrict the use of the property,
Correct.
which is in a commercial zone, by treating it differently than other commercial properties in town. Basically, saying, yeah, you bought it, and now we're going to narrow down what you can and can't do with that. They're going to have plenty of recourse to appeal the town's decision, right? Because it doesn't stop at P&Z. I've had that personal experience.
Yeah.
So the P&C decisions can be appealed, and they can go to a higher court, and you can lose.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it.
Right. That's the thing you need to understand.
Fine.
The reason
Charles-
the town buys it is it closes off any of
All
that
right.
avenue.
Well,
Yeah.
that answers my question. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Charles,
I
just
thought,
to amplify on that for a second, a million years ago, I used to represent a developer, and there are courts and there are theories out there that would say that any P&Z action like that might constitute a Fifth Amendment taking. Almost like an eminent domain type of thing.
Well,
So,
okay, but that depends if you paid 2.7 or 5.2 for the property, doesn't it?
One point I will make here, in part of the due diligence we did for this property, I reviewed all of the P&Z files for 37 West Ave going back to 1950s. I want to preface this by saying that this is not an analysis on the current state of zoning laws in Connecticut, but back in the 1960s, the town did try to do exactly what you're saying right now. In the 1960s, the town did try to use its zoning regulations to perpetually restrict 37 West Ave to just a parking lot,
Yeah.
and the owners successfully argued in court that this was a de facto quasi-taking and condemnation of their property.
Okay.
And they won on that. So this is actually a pertinent, relevant point to this specific property, that we have precedent that would lean against being able to do what we're talking about here.
Okay. Thank you. I'm good.
the other thing that, one thing is that we control it. The other thing is, if we lost it, and that was in JC's deck, we would lose about 15% of our parking spaces. There is no place else currently in town where we could replace 290 parking spots. And that's the other reason why we're doing it. It would be a significant hit to our town. And I was having a conversation with someone on the Board of Finance. One of the things that the example I made is my son bought a home in Ridgefield, and their school is just listed right below Darien in the rankings. But the piece of property that he bought up in Ridgefield for whatever, less than $2 million, is a $4 million property here. So it's not just the schools. One of the strong things that Darien has is its commute into New York, and it's also its commute over to Stamford, Norwalk, or Greenwich, which Ridgefield doesn't have, as he has to go to Katona to get into the city. So the key is that we have to maintain those spots as a strategic alternative to what goes on.
Yeah.
So for me, those are the two main reasons. And the other thing that I'll add before I even get into the finances, government doesn't always buy things for a return on investment the way I would if I was doing my own business investments. Sometimes we do things for the general welfare of the population, and this sort of falls into that category. It's a general benefit to the town to do it. So, when we're going in and looking at the numbers, other than the first 3 years, because the Board of Finance talked about doing a ban in the first year, the anticipated revenue that they're getting at even $10 a car with the average cost and everything doesn't cover
Jack, you turned away from your mic. We can't hear you.
Sorry, I was just looking at the number. I think it covers like 68%. And I think I did a down and dirty that if we just kept it at the $10 lot, not increasing any fees or anything like that over the period of time, it's about a 30-year payback. If we go to a $5 lot, it's about a 40-year payback. And if we go to make it into a permit lot where they pay about $2 to $3 a day, it's a longer payback. But we still have those spots, and that's the key. That mix, that's why I don't want to spend a lot of time on the financials, just saying we know it doesn't cover it, because that mix has yet to be determined by the parking authority. And the parking authority is really the Board of Selectmen, but they make the pricing decisions and then give it back to the Board of Selectmen. And with that, I've asked Jen to give us a little overview of the parking authority to make sure that information that has been said, we're all on the same page. And I'll also tell you that the Bible for the parking authority was written by Kip Coons, interesting enough. And it's not one of the easiest things to understand all the nuances to it. So, Jen, I'll hand that off to you for a while. Oh, Louisa, you have a question?
Yes, a couple of questions. I commute now 3 times a week from 5 times. So I have my permit, my town permit. And what I have noticed sometimes, and it's happening now, is people go probably not at 8 to work. Probably some people go to just afternoon, just to swipe their card. And what I have noticed is that in this parking lot, there's a lot of people that park because they know that the dispatcher is gone at noon.
Yep.
And so I know that we have 2 employees checking the parking lot and putting the fines if you don't have. And will they be until what time checking that to just make sure that we really try to get the most revenue as we should and covering this parking lot with them? And my other question that I have, it is how, like, this is a private parking lot, how, and then the state, you pay in the parking. Can you able to discriminate to type of, for the same owner, the town, to charge parking permits $480 a year, and then the same to your same citizens, just much higher at 10? So are you okay discriminating just like that because you got before and have a permit, and here you have to pay and will not be in a permit? It's just a little bit discrimination, sounds to me. So those are my points. And my third point is the expired lease. Like, I know that it's expired. We have been trying to negotiate, and we have to, but basically the lease requires 20% of the revenue from the state to put it as capital. And we're going to have a $7 million expense coming for Noroton, if I understood it correctly. So what is happening with that expired lease, and what the town is trying to achieve, or basically just increase the state participation, or just a little to understand more also on that?
I'll answer the first 2. The last one is a little bit out of the scope of this meeting.
Okay.
But I will hand it over to Jen and let her talk about what's happening through December and what will be happening when they're using the parking app for that lot, which will be different.
Right.
So
from the time that we close on the property, assuming we close mid-November, right now we're expecting it to run through December 31st. We're going to continue all the operations in the 37 West Avenue lot as is. So the attendant who's there now from 5:30 to noon-ish, will continue to be there. We'll still only accept cash and check in that lot while we work on bringing it into our management system. So our pay by app, the pay stations, our provider has said that they can accommodate 2 different rates if the Board of Selectmen decides to stay with 2 different rates. So we'll get it incorporated into there. And at that point, we'll transition over to having the town's parking enforcement going through that lot. They are on duty until, I think they usually go through 3 o'clock is probably about their last run through there. So there will be about 3 more hours of enforcement and ticketing in that lot compared to what they have now with the attendant who's only there until about noon. And like I said, our vendor has said that they can accommodate different rates in different lots, but we'll have to have some signage to designate that lot as a higher rate so that people can know that they're paying for that on the app.
So you are allowed to charge to basically have 2 parking lots, 2 different fees, and there's no
Yes.
legal problem to
Yes.
the same
Yep.
because,
Yep.
okay.
Yeah, that's allowed, and so it's up to the Board of Selectmen if they want to continue having the 2 different rates.
Okay.
As
Okay,
well as
thank you.
what, as well as what the mix of that lot will,
Right.
because, you know, there is a substantial list for both Norotan and Darien, and the number of spots that the Board of Selectmen or the Parking Authority, whichever one you want to call it, it's one and the same, decide to have as that mix is yet to be determined. So,
Okay. Or just there's never parking. Like it's tough to park on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Fridays is easy to find, but on those days you have to go all the way to the end, and you're lucky if you find
yeah,
a parking space.
I will tell you that there has been comments by other members that that lot is primarily used by people, and they had a monthly and a weekly rate that you could buy it at cheaper than $10, but they stopped selling that at this time.
Yeah, about 135 per quarter.
Yeah. So, but that lot is used not only by people who are on the waiting list, but also a lot of town people who want to go into the city. You know, like there's times I'm meeting friends in the evening. And so, you know, I would park at that lot and, you know, pay what would be appropriate at that time if I'm leaving in the afternoon or something and don't want to get a ticket. And don't want to drive to Stanford to get a train. So, can you just briefly go through some of the revenue that you put on the list, you know, at a very high level, Jen?
Sure. So, big picture to understand the lots that are owned by the state versus the lots that are owned by the town, they go into 2 different funds. The lots that are owned by the town, revenue generated from those goes into the general fund, which supports our overall town operations. The revenue that's generated from the state-owned lots can only be used for maintenance of the lots, the platforms, and the station buildings. But across all of our parking lots, the main revenue sources are permit fees, the daily parking through the pay stations, and ticket revenue. So permits are sold per lot, so it's very clear which lot they belong to, and those are credited based on their lot into either the general fund or the parking fund. And that's about 50% of the revenue that we take in for parking. Pay station revenue, so permits, we take in about $675,000. Pay station, we take in about $480,000. The dedicated daily pay station spaces are all in state-owned lots, but we do allow daily parking in the permit lots, state or town, anytime after 9 a.m. So there's a small portion that could be in a town-owned lot. probably about 9 years ago, we did some space counts and we came up with an allocation for pay station revenue of 1.45% to the general fund and 98.55% to the parking fund. And then parking tickets, we take in the last year, we used to take in more pre-COVID, but in the last year we took in about $110,000. And those could be issued for violations of not paying in the daily lot, not displaying your permit in the permit lot. So they could be mixed throughout the different lots. So that allocation is 22% to the general fund and 78% to the parking fund. When it comes to West Avenue, right now, because it's $10, it's going to be a $10 daily fee. If it stays that way, it's very obvious which transactions are from that parking lot. So those would get credited to the general fund because it'll be a town-owned lot. They'll get credited, kind of factored out, credited directly to the general fund, and then remaining pay station revenue would be subject to that allocation of 1.4% and 98.55%.
And the expenses are allocated as well. The parking fund expenses you actually see in the monthly Board of Finance report, which I'm constantly reminding people to take a look at. And, for the most part, and this just is a little bit of side history, about 20 years ago or so, or maybe even longer than that, Darien negotiated with the state that we would collect the funds and then use those funds for capital improvements at our two train stations. Other towns did not. So in the Stanford lot, they decided that the state will get all of their revenues, but then they're dependent upon the state to do improvements. And I'm familiar with some friends over in Stanford. It took them 10, 15 years to get just minor upgrades over in the Springdale lot, because that comes out of the state budget. This was really a very smart move by whoever negotiated that years and years ago. So is there any other questions on the parking fund, or we can move on? Okay, go ahead, Charles.
Jack, it's not specific to the parking fund, but the quality of the pavement in 37 West is not very good. It's going to be just a matter of time until we come back and end up repaving it. The other comment I would make is that the Coons family was very aggressive in terms of sizing their lot sizes. I think that when we repave, we will have to probably make the car spaces somewhat wider. Has there been any discussion in terms of including and bonding the cost of repaving, or is that just something we're kicking down the road? And the other question is, how much taxes are they currently paying on the parking lot?
31,000 about.
Okay.
As for the paving, they recently repaved about half of the lot. The other half does need to be done. It's not an immediate need, so it'll get worked into our 6-year capital plan. As a rule for the town, we don't bond paving costs for streets or for parking lots, so we would do that through general capital. And then as for striping, we do need to also evaluate the lot for ADA compliance. We will have to put in some accessible spaces, and since those are larger, we'll lose a few spots as well. So right now, I think the appraisal said there were like 310 spots, but according to Kip, the most he's really gotten in there is 293. So we've been operating with the 293 number as a max.
Yeah, that's why I keep on saying 290 in that area. And as a follow-up, there was some discussion when they did Norotan Heights, and Beth anecdotally said, you can say what you said about parking, that the spots are in fact wider than what was 8 feet before.
They definitely are, because I was parking there last week, and historically, every time you park at Norotan Heights, unless you bring a Mini Cooper, you very gingerly get out of the car so as to not ding the car next to you and do a weird little shuffle. And I was actually able to get my car out of my car in an almost normal fashion last week. So I think they're definitely wider than they were previously.
Yeah, so we're going to lose a couple things. You know, one of the things that we talked about, Jen and I did, is that they did investigate on the app whether or not, you know, people could identify what lot they're in when they're doing the daily parking, things like that on some of these. But that's expensive. And for most of us who park in garages where they have a number, half of us go back to where we parked the car to find out what that number is, because by the time we walked from where the car is to the pay station, we forgot the number. So that was decided that's too much for anything that it's going to give us in the long-term benefit.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, we're still exploring some options, but the initial option that we were looking at that was going to be a big upgrade to technology was really cost prohibitive. And that would have tracked a lot by lot, which would be an enhancement from what we have now, which is not tracked by lot. But we're still looking for a more detailed tracking by lot, but that's a reasonable cost.
Are there any other, are there other questions? I mean, as we said, financially, we'll pay, I think the number is on a 20-year at $10, about 68% of the debt service. It's less at $5, but we haven't moved there yet. I'm going to say for the first 3 years, it's anticipated that the revenue from this slot will cover the debt service, because the first year at the Board of Finance, and this is yet to be finalized, but they were talking about issuing a ban, which comes in at a much lower rate, and then bonding it the following year with 2 years interest only. At another meeting, we'll talk about my position on 2 years interest only at this time, but it's not appropriate to this decision or whether or not we're buying it. That's a long-term conversation we'll be having with the finance. So, are there any other questions that we can answer? Is everybody ready to vote?
I am.
Well,
Yes.
Okay,
Hold on, Jack, so I'm ready to vote on the motion.
ready to vote on the motion as amended. Yes.
Right. I have a couple things I want to add just briefly. On the merits of this, I completely agree. We should buy the parking spot. It is a strategic asset. We need that infrastructure. But I have two problems. One of which is substantive with the debt. We have so much debt right now. Our debt load is increasing. I know that Board of Finance members are very concerned about that also. That was expressed to both myself and Per at a sidebar after Tuesday's meeting. To boil it all down, if we want to take on this extra debt, including what's the price tag for fixing it, and I just think we can't complain about our mill rate going up, and that's really what I'm concerned about, because I know that when we get to the springtime, we start talking about the budgets, and we start talking about, well, what is sustainable? Again, I believe sustainability is a purely subjective measure. I just feel like we want to have it all, but we sometimes don't necessarily want to pay for it. So I'm going to vote for it, but with great reservation, because I know that down the road, people are going to be saying, well, we can't afford this, we can't afford that. And that's my concern. And that, because of that concern, I also believe that only having to approve this in a couple of weeks at the next meeting, I think this issue raises the question of priorities. What's more important? And I believe that this is important, but I think RTM members are asking, why don't we have more time to consider this? Because we have to consider priorities. And so that's my second objection, but I will vote for it because it is important, because I think it's worth paying for. And that's it.
For me, it's just a priority as a commuter, because if you take those spaces, we have a big problem.
So I understand that. I understand that, but I'm concerned. I had a couple off the record conversations with some Board of Finance members who agreed with me that this is the debt load that is approaching is something we have to be very, very concerned about. And it's going to be hard to take on all this debt and not have to pay for it and not have to have our mill rate go up.
Well, actually, that's one of the things that we expressed to the Board of Ed at the last budget meeting, and then even Peter, Beth, and I, when we met with the acting superintendent, that we would like the contribution on the budget to show their operating budget, their capital, their debt service, their off-cycle amounts, less what they've given back, and the ECS, because that actually flows into the next year, but add it back. Because some of the parents, when I was speaking to them, actually had no clue that we had to pay for the schools that we're building, because it's not on the Board of Ed side of the presentation. So we just ask that the parents get a better view of what the town has committed to our school system, and that's one of the ways to do it, which is consistent with what Peter is saying. I do know that we will be asked on Monday's RTM meeting to add John to the agenda. He originally had planned to update his debt presentation that had given us previously with some new numbers and going up to 2040 because the numbers are going to change. And so on that regard, if there's questions, shoot them off to, first of all, shoot them off to John first, if you don't mind. You don't have to go through me. So that he's prepared to answer certain things there. But I think that will address some of the issues that all of us are concerned about, is how much debt can we have and what the effect on the mill rate is. I don't like managing to a mill rate increase. I like managing to what we actually need to get done. So, and we just may have to pay for it. Because, Peter, as you say, some of the cost of HHR is that we weren't properly maintaining some of our facilities or structure. And so we don't want to get into a situation that the capital investment that we have, we don't do because we're worried that the mill rate's going up another 5 basis points. That's not the way to run a business or a town. So are we now ready to vote?
Yeah.
Okay. All those in favor of the 25-23 as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so that's unanimous. That allows us to move on to the next thing. Let me just get a wee bit organized here.
Hey, Jack, while you're doing that, so Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding was the Board of Finance, much like us, approving the bond, but they haven't made a final determination of whether the bond is the right way to finance the purchase. They're still looking at what their, Jen, correct me if I'm wrong, whatever their cash position is in the town's general fund coming into the end of the year to see if they've got that as an option to pay cash rather than use the bond.
Well,
no, Parent, my recollection is that you are correct. That's a discussion that I think that's going to happen down the road.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
that
I just thought I'd share that with everyone if they
well,
want.
there's 2 alternatives here. Besides 3 actually. One is we do the bonding. The other is we pay down some of the amount so that the estimated revenue covers what the anticipated bonding cost is. So it's budget neutral on the mill rate. And the third thing is we take the monies out of the general fund based upon the excess that they have, and we pay cash.
Mhm.
If that happens, because the Board of Selectmen recommended that we bond, they would have to go back to the Board of Selectmen
Mhm.
to have whatever that mix is which then would go back to the Board of Finance and then would come back to the RTM.
Correct.
Change that original amount.
Yeah.
So
So everyone should just be aware that while we voted for this, there is the possibility that it may come back to us again in an amended form if they decide to do one of those other two options.
and Jen, if I'm not mistaken, the initial conversation starts sometime in February and then March, along those lines, because we typically go out to market in April, or it depends upon when the bans are coming due.
This year will definitely be April because they're 1-year bans. We issued them in April of last year. So we usually start the discussion with the Board of Finance about size and structure and what we want to include in it. Yeah, February. By March, they will have to take action and actually approve the size and the structure of the issue. So yeah, February is probably where we'll start.
And I know that because there was a little bit of confusion or questions being asked at the Board of Finance of what the timing is. But that was my basic recollection.
Yep.
And we will have analysis from the bond advisor who will show various options to the Board of Finance of what various costs are, estimates, and other things like that. So it's not just the structure, but they will have some long-term aspects to it. The other thing to mention, and based upon one of my conversations that I've had with the Board of Finance, is typically where, and I've been saying there's been growth in the two operating budgets, and we're seeing the debt service grow. And what that's squeezing is capital, unless we get the operating budgets under control, because most of our debt right now that we're going to see growth on is stuff that we've already committed to. So the question then becomes, if we take, I'm just going to say $2 million out of the general fund to pay this down, that's possibly $2 million that we don't have when we're looking at the 27 fiscal year to purchase from the general fund capital, which we typically do. So that's one of the things that they will be analyzing also, because if we don't have that 2 million and we still want the capital that was in the fiscal year 27 budget, that goes into the mill rate. So taxes will increase next year to pay for that decision. So that's the other side of it on the discussion they will be having. So are we ready to move on to the next item? So the next item, and seeing, attorneys are still here, good. So pursuant to Chapter 100 of the Connecticut General Statutes, when property is acquired pursuant to the issuance of municipal bonds, the legislative body of such municipality must set the initial fee schedules for the parking facilities on the acquired property. We're working on this with town council, and we also currently, based upon an ordinance Darien, have given the authority to the Board of Selectmen and the Parking Authority to handle all increases associated with the parking lot. This also says after we set the $10 rate, we're handing them back that authority. So we don't have to approve any of their increases from one year to the next. So that's the other major part of this. We're secondary on this. The Parking Authority falls under the Public Works on the scope document. This is, we're going to pass this. There is a public hearing. Public hearing is addressing some of the regulation changes that they have to make. Part of those regulations are, that we're going to have an attendant, what the parking fee is, and a couple of other things in the regulations that have changed That is on the website. We're not voting on that. What we're voting on is to say that the initial rate is $10. So is there any questions or assessment on that? Or Bobby, do you want to add anything to that?
Beyond just saying this is a weird quirk required by statutory law, that even though the Board of Selectmen is the parking authority, we have a statute that says that when we're creating a new parking facility or acquiring or establishing one, setting the fees is required by the legislative body, the RTM. But once they do that, as Jack said, then the Board of Selectmen, in their capacity as the parking authority, they take the ball from there and make the decisions thereafter.
Which is a good thing, because we don't want to look at every fee every year.
Okay.
So, yeah, really, there's other things we can work on.
Mhm.
So if not any other questions, I'll ask somebody to move the resolution of the RTM of the town of Darien approving the adoption of the initial daily rate, daily parking fees, and the issuance of periodic parking passes at 37 West Avenue.
So moved.
I have Pierre. I need a second. I have Beth. Are we ready to vote? Everybody's ready?
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Laura
Thank you.
Pescray,
Laura,
aye.
yeah, I knew who it was, Laura. The voice came from the phone. All right. So the last thing that we put on the agenda, because we're not going to do minutes today, is there's going to be a change in the how they do the budget. For anybody who's interested, I do have a video of Mr. Byrne at his last budget meeting in Rye. It's about 30 minutes. It is different than what we had heard in the past from our prior superintendent. But anything else, Beth, want to give us an update?
Yeah, so I think when he came into the district, our interim superintendent, talked to a lot of people, and something he heard from absolutely everybody is that the budget process really needed to be changed, because each year has gotten more and more of a horrible slog that, people getting upset, giant amounts of public comment, and then things that have been removed being put back in the budget and so forth. And so he presented to the Board of Ed a couple of weeks ago, or like a week and a half ago, a proposed change in how the whole budget process is being done moving forward, which I think we could all say it could only be better than what we have now. So the first change, and you can go back and look at the Board of Ed meeting. There's a whole presentation on what he plans to do with the timeline. But the first thing is that the Board of Ed actually gets the budget books. I think it's December 18th. Then we would get our budget books right after winter break. So the board has some time to digest what's in the budget books before, so that it's not a big surprise. And he has also said anything that's in there, we will have been talking about in the lead up to the budget season. So you will know what the priorities are, because we will have talked about them at Board of Ed meetings. In addition, he's gotten rid of Super Saturday, the highly detailed slog through the entire Board of Ed budget, or superintendent's proposed budget, I should say. There will not be a full day Saturday meeting, which personally I can only rejoice, because that by the end, you don't even care what the last presentation is, because you're so fried. And instead, he'll be doing sort of a preview, and they'll be presenting on various parts of the budget and getting feedback from the board right away that they can then incorporate into any sort of amendments as the whole process moves along, rather than being, having all these conversations, then having an ad cut night, then having the public hearing. Instead, that people will be encouraged to come and ask questions at the time, and give public comment then, rather than like saving it all up for the end, essentially. And so the budget calendar will be different, and he's laid out what he'd like the budget calendar to be. So I can send it around, but I'd encourage you to just go.
Well,
It's not a long presentation.
no, we sent the presentation to everyone, and I gave a timestamp on the October 14th meeting.
Yeah, it was
It
like at
starts
1
about an
hour,
and
3 minutes or something.
Yeah. And, he goes on pillars, so we're going to have a better understanding of what those pillars are. He did the same thing basically at Rye. Having done strategy before, my only concern, which we'll talk about on the 30th when we're meeting him, is that I appreciate pillars, but they all can't be a number one priority. So how is he going to be prioritizing initiatives within those pillars? Because that's going to change. And, everything can't be number one. The other thing that Beth was alluding to, but because I'm not subtle, the comment is no surprises. The last couple of years, we've heard surprises that were not discussed at the Board of Ed meetings, such as paras, ideal, and some other things over the years. So that's a good thing, because that will cut out at least an hour of public comment to start every one of those meetings. So that's appreciative. I also checked with Jen just tentatively on what her budget presentation is, because this one is starting to move into when the Board of Selectmen typically does theirs. The first budget presentation of the town administrator will be the last Monday in January, and tentatively the first week in February is when they will review the major parts of their budget. One of the things that I am hopeful of, and part of what we're going to be talking about, if you're just doing it in the evenings, 3 or 4 events, there's certain RCs in the town budget, in the Board of Ed budget, that quite honestly, if they're up 20%, I don't even care. They're small budgets. They're under $100,000. Only if there's something, major going on there. I'm not sure we really need to have that presentation on everything that we had during Super. I think, Beth, you said it. When you get into that much detail, people get too much into the weeds. Yep. And you do have to trust that we hired a administration that has more educational knowledge than most of us in what they do. We don't get into the weeds so much. We tend to speak on process and procedure, and we'll continue to do that. Anything else or questions? Good. So we have 2 minutes now to take a motion to adjourn, and that way we're less than an hour on this meeting versus 3 hours and 40 minutes.
Moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Bobby and Wade, thank you very much for going. Laura, thank you for calling in. Everyone have a good evening. And the good part is at least baseball games are back on tomorrow night.
Thanks, Jack. Good night,
Take
everyone.
care.
Good night, everyone.
Guys.